All right, guys. Welcome back to the Sobriety University podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we're really excited for this one. We got an awesome panel with, for the first time, three people that don't use substances. So I'm very honored to be on this panel. And so introduce Thomas and Lando. And today we're going to be talking about Stoicism and sobriety. This topic actually came from Thomas. So I'm going to pass it over to him to kind of talk about why he decided to talk about this topic and what it means to him. So Thomas, feel free to take her away.
Yeah, thanks, man. Sobriety and stoicism separately are topics that have changed my life for obvious reasons. Sobriety has allowed me to lose the mental fog and have a design for living that allows me to no longer need to escape life by using substances. And that's really powerful. Just from the relationship side alone, the benefits have far exceeded all the negatives or the perceived cons of not taking substances. And in light of sobriety, it has opened the door for me to understand more of stoicism, which I now have realized over time that the two really work well in tandem, And so if I live a life, for example, where escapism and coping through substances is no longer an option for me, well, how do I deal with life when life decides to deal with me, And I found that stoicism and a spiritual design for living have a lot in alignment. I think stoicism has a much more grittier, hardier take than kind of a more ephemeral spiritual, design that most spiritual programs have. But I find that the two together do work really well. I think sobriety and like I said, a spiritual design for living has kind of like a higher, it's focused on a higher power, right? So power that's outside of our control. And in turn, stoicism has a lot of principles that speak to the same thing, but with a much more grounded, practical application that we all can apply today. So whether you're sober curious, not sober, or even practice the spiritual way of living, stoicism can definitely still be a great philosophy to adopt to allow you to handle life on life's terms. So that was a great topic to bring up for you guys.
Oh, beautiful, man. And my question then to you guys is, what is stoicism? Like, what is that definition to you? And I'll pass it to Lando if you want to dive into that on your end. What do you think stoicism means to you? What have you learned over the years that it applies to your life, etc.?
Yes, first off, thank you for having me on here. Looking forward to this discussion. So in terms of stoicism, I'm relatively new to the topic, so I'd love to learn more about it with you guys. But from the small information that I gathered, it's not thinking emotionally, and that's about it. So I'd love to learn more about you guys, and I can also add value to this discussion in terms of my sobriety and how I got there.
Awesome. Thank you, Lando. Sure. Yeah, I think I like the way you guys both put it. It's a way to live on life's terms. That was really powerful. I think you said it really well, Thomas. Like, you get sober and you think that, like, okay, I'm in control now. Nope. Life is always in control. The amount of control you realize you actually have in this world is so little, which is powerful because it means that you don't have to try as hard because you can just focus on what you can control. Yeah, when life kicks you in the nuts, it's like, okay, what am I going to do to bounce back? And stoicism, I'm like familiar with Ryan Holiday and kind of like the YouTube craze of stoicism. And for some reason, I never like really got into it too much. But the times I have, I'm like, I think the reason why I didn't is because I'm like, oh, like the recovery programs and the work I'm doing in those groups is very similar to this. So it's just like another way of saying it. And I really like how you said it too, Lando. It's being non-emotional with your decisions and your frame of mind reference. And I appreciate you saying that as well, because I'm somebody that has for most of my life has run off emotion. And when the emotions are high, it's a lot of fun. When the emotions are low, it's like, oh, the agony. So I think this can be very powerful for people that do have that emotional side to them, and to learn how to kind of find that balance. So Thomas, like, how did you get into stoicism? Like, how does it apply to you?
Yeah. So I remember in my first like year of sobriety, I was asked like, what do you want? Like, what do you want from this? Why do you want to be sober? And my initial response internally was, I want to be free, right? I want to be a free man that gets to go anywhere, not affected by the outside world, to be able to move through life. And then the word came up for me, and it's like peace. I just want peace of mind. That's really what I want, and where stoicism came into play is I was talking with a friend of mine. We were doing like a podcast together during COVID, and stoicism came up. I then once came across Ryan Holiday, started getting the Daily Stoic, and then started having conversations with different people. And I just really appreciated a lot of the different principles that the philosophy taught, especially around controlling what you can and letting go of what you can't, practicing self-control, using rationality to make better decisions, and using and also, by the way, because I think just one thing I want to just kind of get out there is sometimes stoicism gets a bad rap because sometimes the perception of stoicism is being unemotional, right? And that's actually not true. What stoicism teaches you is to be able to make decisions not fueled by emotion, being able to understand that you do have emotions, to be able to process them properly, and then go back to reason and logic to make what you believe is the next best decision. Because as you described, when emotions are high, chances are you're not thinking in the most rational mind, and you're not able to make the best decisions, right? Like if I didn't have good sleep last night, which I didn't, right? I'm not going to make quick, irrational decisions, because the likelihood of that happening is really big. So I'm going to put off, any opportunity I can to make any big decisions until I get a good night's sleep, because I become more susceptible in my nervous system to emotional, right, ups and downs. So stoicism has taught me that that it's okay to have emotions, and it's okay to make decisions without them, and that there's nothing wrong with that.
Wow, man, that's crazy. And you think that when you're really happy or high on life, that your decision will be better because they're fueled by that happiness. But then when you actually look at it, you're like, oh, maybe not, from your definition. Maybe like erratic, manic decisions aren't great, even though they feel really good. So I really like that. Like it sounds like what you're saying is you make decisions that it's not about them feeling right anymore. It's about them being right. Whether there's right or wrong, that's up for debate. We could have a whole podcast on is right or wrong real.
Yeah.
But
your internal compass determines what's right and wrong, right? Like you have your own moral ethics code that determines that, right? So leading with that kind of blueprint, you can then choose, what decisions to make, and even if things are coming in, like we just recently, fostered a dog, and obviously dogs are awesome, right? And there's so much joy it brings into the world. And the feeling of that joy and that happiness, that connection can totally lead to you making irrational decisions, right? Because it's coming from that place. Doesn't mean it doesn't come from a good place, right? You're feeling really good about it, but is it the best decision, right? Is it the best choice to make in that moment, right? And so stoicism, and bringing it back to sobriety, right? Like one of the things that stoicism also teaches, that I think sobriety has also taught me, is the power of that pause, right? Because irrationality starts to dissipate the longer the pause that exists, right, in between your decision making. So there's a saying in sobriety that your pause is only as long as many years that you have.
Oh, man.
Right? And so the longer time you have, the longer you have a capacity of holding that pause. But it does make a difference.
Oh, dude, I so like that. As I look at my sobriety journey over the years, that pause has gotten a lot better. Like what I'm dealing with now, if I were to deal with on year 2, I would have lost my shit. So crazy. So I have actually a really important question for you, Thomas. Before I ask, though, I want to turn over to Lando. And can you fill us in a little bit on how you got sober? Like, what's your journey with sobriety, and how'd you get sober,
Sure,
basically.
sure. Absolutely. Thank you again. And before I get into that, just to piggyback on what you guys were discussing, in recovery, a lot of issues are come from resentments and anger. And so if you tie in the Stoicism and take that into consideration, you want to get yourself free of those emotions that will just take you back to the to the drinking or whatever your addiction may be.
Mhm.
And personally, it also takes you far away from your higher power or that spirituality. So all those things you were mentioning. In terms of my journey with alcohol, my drug of choice or addiction was alcohol. I'm the garden variety, but anyways, I come from a broken home. I shut down emotionally when I was 11. I started noticing I couldn't relate to other people. Um, I was pretty good at sports, but I started shutting down. Um, I focused mainly on school, but I didn't go to prom. I didn't really date other women and stuff like that. Um, I just was was a ghost. I would suppose. I suppose, and then but I don't know, kind of a contradiction at times. I was able to get into good schools because I was just in the books and stuff like that. So, long story short, my first time I got drunk was I was 17. It was a trip to go check out the school I got accepted to. It was Duke University. And I had alcohol, man, the vodka. And, and I fell in love, man. I got drunk and I had thought I found the solution. Um, just felt at peace, man. Just peace. I thought I had found the solution. I can't explain it anymore. So I kept on chasing that, and then in college, um, I went to college and I just got a bachelor's in drinking, just drinking. I barely scraped by, but I didn't really take it full advantage of all the opportunities I had. I got an academic scholarship, so but I just kept on drinking. And then I graduated without a job, depressed, and just the only thing I was living for was just vodka, beer, whatever. Not able to make friendships. And long story short, I ended up getting a DUI after college. That sets you back a couple of years. I was living with a drug dealer, and just seeing life pass me by. And then I was in and out of the program a couple of times. You get sober, you're like, yeah, I got this. Uh, my way works. Quickly, you find out. You just find yourself back in the program. And then finally, by the third or fourth time, I found a pathway to God, my higher power. And then obviously I worked the program. For those out there, it's called AA. But anyways, it's just a program. For me, it was a pathway to my higher power, and it cleared the obsession. And I've been sober about 10 years, and it hasn't been. Thank you. It hasn't been all rainbows and butterflies. I've noticed. Well, not noticed. It's in my opinion, it's a fact. Your sobriety is highly dependent on your spiritual condition. So, but that's pretty much in a nutshell.
Well, thanks for sharing, Lando.
Yeah.
At first, I was laughing because like you kind of look Russian, so it's not a surprise you got into vodka. And related to your story a lot, it's I shut down emotionally at about 15, so we're a few years after you, and it's everybody. I don't think I've talked to a single person that has gotten into addiction that hasn't come from some sort of dysfunctional family background. So we're all in this together, and it's exciting to hear that you did it and you're 10 years clean. That's amazing, man.
That is awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And kind of in the stoicism aspect, like how have you gotten through some of those tough times? Because you said it hasn't been all peaches and rainbows.
Yeah. So a big part of me is I have anger issues. So got to deal with that. The fourth step. But if you want immediate results, just work with another suffering alcoholic. that always for me has been the key. And then just staying in close contact with God and living a spiritual life. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And then one day at a time. I mean, I could end up drinking tomorrow, who knows, but through the grace of God, that's how it hasn't been me, man, not me. Yeah.
I like how you say that. It's so simple when you put it into words, and that's not easy, as they say. It's simple, it's not easy. Yeah. So when it's not easy, I think that's kind of what we're going to transition into next, is how to get through some of those times. So my question, coming full circle to you, Thomas, is, you said that Stoicism involves, making decisions based on logic and reasoning. What happens when you make that decision and it's actually not the right decision?
Yeah, great question, right? So the first thing to ask yourself, and if I was in this situation, right? So I'm going to treat this like recovery, right? So did I harm anyone in the decision that I made? That's the first thing I think about, right? Because if I did, then I get to make amends, right? Because I need to take responsibility for my part in those actions and in that decision. And then I have to ask for forgiveness, but also, how can I make it right? Right? What can I do to make it right? Because that's what amends is. It's not just apologizing and getting forgiveness. It's, how can I make it right? You amend the situation. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that I take a look at is like, well, did I harm myself? And then I have to do a living amends with myself, right? By being in reflection, learning from the situation, right? Doing my own personal inventory, right? You can call this journaling or, inventory. We talk about that a lot in recovery, right? But you journal about the situation. You look at your part, how you hurt yourself. What's the lesson to come from that situation? What can you do to be better from that situation? And then, the way that I look at it is similar to Lando, is like, well, how can I now take this lesson and help someone else? Right. So that way I don't stew in the wrongness of my decision. I don't beat myself up for having made a mistake, because I'm human. Like, that's just going to happen. Wow. So to get out of myself, I immediately look to see how I can help other people. And for me, it could be sharing a similar situation on social media and turning into a lesson where I can give advice. Or maybe it's calling, someone who's also in recovery and connecting with them. Or talking to a sponsor or sponsee, or going to a recovery meeting, right? Or just being more present with my family and being of service to them, right? Like, there's so many different directions you can go, but the number one theme is getting out of myself, so I don't go into that spiral of self-loathing.
Oh, Thomas. Sing, my brother. I'm actually journaling that right now. I'm taking notes, guys. This is the key to growth, is to take notes and review them. So yeah, dude, that's so powerful. Like, sometimes we forget we're human, and we fuck up. And even with our best intentions, it sometimes isn't correct. And I think the most important thing, like you said, is to learn from it and take the lesson, and then give back in terms of, can this lesson help someone? So just as an example, like, I would say it was a mistake to myself and to my core values recently. From mentorship outside of me, I was told that it's not a big deal. So I'm having to rework some of my internal beliefs and like, okay, why did I choose to do this, etc. But it's weird because I made that mistake, I stumbled across like just the events that preceded after led me to something that has completely changed my life. Like in the matter of like a few days. And because I was like walking by, Jaron, you guys have seen him on the channel. I was walking by his room. He had a video on that I was like, oh, that's exactly what I'm like dealing with. And I just like binge watched all the person's content. And it's like, had that not happened, that mistake I made a couple of days prior, would I have ended up walking by his room at that exact moment? Yeah. So it's like, that's the weird part. It's like I wouldn't be where I am today without that mistake. And there's still that regret of not doing what I wish I would have done inside. So coming back to Stoicism, I think it's like, right, looking at the rational and logical, like you just did, Thomas. We're mistakes. We try things out and they don't work, and then we get back on the horse and we give it another try, and that's really all we can do. So I guess any situations for yourself where you've had to call in stoicism for a mistake you've made?
Yeah. I mean, self-examination is one of the big principles in stoicism, right? And it actually is in recovery, right? Like a daily inventory, right? Like, did you commit any wrongs? Are there amends to make? How did you show up in your life? What did you do to stay sober today? That's a question that I often hear from other people. It's like, what did you do to stay sober today? Because as Lando said, right, we get this daily reprieve, and it's contingent on our spiritual, I like to call it our spiritual fitness, right? Because fitness is defined in my eyes of the speed in which we can recover from trauma, right? So if we get an emotional setback or something happens to us in our lives, do we have the spiritual fitness to be able to bounce back and overcome that situation? Or will we crumble emotionally and maybe spiritually, and then that could eventually lead us to physically crumbling in the form of a gesture towards a drink, right? So doing that self-examination is super key, and something that I personally do every morning is I ask myself, what am I letting go of, right? So it's me trying to practice a form of release of control, right? So it could be resentment, it could be frustration, it could be me thinking that I have control over the situation, whatever that situation may be, and then I'll take a deeper level of examination around it. Looking at, okay, well, was there a story in my mind that drove that behavior or caused that trigger of emotion? And is that story true? Right? Like, I should check in. Like, is that story true? And if that story wasn't true, what's possible? If I didn't have that story, where's there evidence that this story isn't true? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, there is something that I'm looking for, right? And what I'm looking for is usually based on a fear of losing something, right? And so in my case, it could be fear of not being good enough, fear of abandonment, or being unloved or unacknowledged. And you find that out when you do deeper inventory, when you work the steps of a spiritual recovery program. But once you kind of know that, you can start to see the layers in which your behaviors are all rooted in one dominant fear. And so that self-examination, doing a journal, really supports me in healing that, right? Like, it might be a lifetime pursuit for me to try to fully heal that fear and that harm that I've either created or has been inflicted upon me, prior to sobriety, but that daily practice is part of that daily reprieve.
Lando, any thoughts on that?
Right on. Thank you for sharing all that information. We just got to do the work. Got to do the work. And also, I think it's good to not only to realize that you may be emotional, or the journaling to see where you are. And then I think it's also for me, it's important to have a network of people that you can rebound or bounce ideas, or to make sure that whatever's in your head is accurate or inaccurate. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Dude, totally. Like, sometimes you think you have the greatest idea, and they're just like, no. I wanted to sign up for Tony Robbins coaching for like 10 grand. My mentor was like, no, that's like the worst idea you've ever had. In my head, I was like, this is it. I'm gonna make that money tenfold. And so we call it walking you off the cliff is how I say it. So I have a couple sponsors from a couple of different programs, and they're very helpful. And they're like, and at the end, one of them's Australian. He's like, all right, mate, I'm glad I got to walk you off the cliff, and have a good week. So funny.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna reiterate the quote Thomas said. What I'm afraid of is losing something.
Yeah.
Always the fear of loss of identity, loss of a situation, loss of control, loss of a story. I think that's a big one for me with relationships and et cetera. For specifically, I'll meet someone and I'll get the story of like what it could be, like the story of like, wow, I finally like met my family's expectations, right, of dating someone. So my big thing is attachment. So when they pull away, as every relationship, there's going to be moments of separation and not closeness. My alarms go off, and then really that fear comes up, and it's like, it's tough because I know it's a selfish fear. It's not a like altruistic fear. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna, I could have been so generous if they weren't pulling away.
Yeah.
Maybe that's somewhat true, right? I could have been more generous to them. But it's really the fear of the loss of the story and the identity of who I was with that person. And now that that's crumbling, it's like, oh my God, like, who am I again? Logically, though, and coming back to Stoicism, it's like, okay, well, relationship doesn't work out. You'll go meet someone else just like you did with them. The person you met before was a random person that you walked up to and said, hola. Well, Lando and I do some Spanish once a week. So
Nice.
I think everyone knows what hola is, but yeah, it's just crazy, those emotions. And so I like it. Taking that inventory every morning is super powerful. They talk about in the program too, when you get to a certain part of the work, you could say, you do take a daily inventory and, did I hurt anybody? Did I hurt myself? And that's a big one. So let's, when you do hurt somebody, when you do make those mistakes, how do you find that forgiveness for yourself? And I know you kind of talked about, making those amends. What does that mean exactly? What is an amend versus saying, hey, I'm sorry, man?
Yeah. Later, you want to take it first?
Sure. For me, I beat myself up a lot. So just being kind to yourself, So even if you made a mistake and you're living a spiritual life, or on a spiritual compass, like Thomas said earlier, we're all human. So just acknowledge it, and quickly make amends. Don't let it fester, because it could grow. But there are times where you don't want to make amends, because you got to also protect yourself. So you also have to be calculated. But if your sobriety is contingent on it, you better get on it as soon as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes the last thing you want to do is say that might be, and the person might leave. The person might walk away. I made an amends to a good friend when I was getting sober, like a couple years in, and the relationship just didn't work out. He was like a best friend in high school, and so it really stung. But kind of just every loss is a lesson, and it helps you, I think, get closer to yourself, which is a big thing I see people get into recovery struggle with. And I'm speaking for myself too, having that internal like compass, being able to be your own rock and not needing other people to be that rock for you. And comment down below if you recognize with that, because man, that has been my biggest struggle, like learning that I am the most important part of my life. And in doing that, it's weird, because once I do that, everyone else becomes even more important at the same time. So it's a very interesting paradox. We talk about codependency on this channel here and there, and a big part of that is trying to get your self-worth from other people. And you see it when you have someone in your life that is codependent. You just get so frustrated with them, because they're always trying to help you and save you and give you advice and rescue you. And it's like, bro, like chill. Even sometimes with this YouTube channel, I'm like, all right, how many videos post a week? Because like, you can get too much with the advice giving and stuff. So yeah, it's a very fine balance. We got a couple homies in the house. Renegade Wingman, what's up, brother?
Yo.
Thanks for coming, man. We'll say in tandem with the professional wingman here, his partner in crime. So good to see you, and also a member of the Men of Now community, and as well as Kevin Lewis. What's up, my friend? Let's see. I think outside influences play a big role in interpreting your journey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why before sobriety, I was heavily influenced by the outside world. right? Like, I mean, I would even be kind of described as a chameleon, because I knew exactly how to mold myself to any social environment to maximize the experience, right? AKA get what I wanted, right? So, so like I was heavily influenced from, by the outside world. I mean, I saw it as a way for me to understand my identity. That was the program that I ran inside of, and then on the other side, like inside of sobriety, I wasn't aware until I got sober how often I allow external forces to influence me. And even to this day, almost 5 years later, like I still have to have that awareness, because if I don't, I can still get swept up in the throes of an external environment and try to assimilate myself in a way that is not congruent with who I am and the values I live by today. So it's still a consistent practice that needs to be involved. But I would 100% agree with Kevin, especially in the world that we live in today, where so much of the outside world is accessible to us in a way that it's never existed before. It can totally disrupt and interrupt your journey, wherever you're choosing to go. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah. Oh man, 100%, dude. Like, I think almost everyone here has fallen into the YouTube rabbit hole where, you watch content you find somebody that just speaks to you and they're so passionate. And then a year later, you're like, holy crap, like, what have I been listening to? Funny enough, Kevin reached out through our group chat for the Men of Now. And he dropped something about for a show we're going to do with a creator. I'll just say it. He's not going to find this channel. Dave Ramsey. And I was a huge Dave Ramsey guy. I watched all his videos. He helped me get out of debt, so I'm very grateful. And he's very negative, though, and he's very shaming towards people that have debt and who make mistakes. And so, I found myself after a year and getting out of debt, I was like judging and just everyone who had debt, and it's just like, man, I'm not in debt. I'm so much higher than you. It's just like, even though I had no money because I didn't have debt, but that meant I had no money because I just gotten out of debt. So I didn't really have much I was proud of myself, but I definitely had to undo some of that influence. And I think in the dating space too, and something that's very cool about, each one of us here is we all have experience with that. And Thomas, you are a dating coach yourself. The Men and Now community, guys, if you haven't heard about it yet, I really recommend considering hopping in. If you are a guy looking to level up with other guys, find a community of dudes that are just going to help support you and encourage you on your mission. There's no hierarchy. There's nothing wild like that. We're just all equals coming in to help each other grow. And, it's a $75 investment a month, and you get access to all of us, which, we all charge a great deal for our coaching. Not a great deal. We all charge enough for our coaching. And so you get to talk with us one-on-one without having to go through that avenue. So really recommend checking out there. You can hit up the link down below. And I think coming back to the dating, a lot of people watch these dating videos from these dating creators, and they usually find them in a place of trauma. So when you hear the anger towards women and all that, it's very seductive when you are angry towards women. You're like, oh, finally someone gets my pain and my anger. But, as you listen to that for a year and you walk around and you start like hating women, it's like, okay, maybe this isn't the most healthy thing for me. So I really appreciate that comment, Kevin, that we are very influenced by our outside. And so that comes back to the topic today, is coming back into who we are as people, and that stoicism. So using our own logic, our own wisdom. And we got Seth Gondwy. What's up, brother? Not quite sure who you are, but great to see you. I think I've seen your name before. And then what's up, Andy? Also a member of the Men and Now. Great to see you. Has some great advice on check out his channel, guys, for tips on fitness and just living a cool life at home, having a nice apartment or house or whatever. He's always got a great backdrop. So, well, yes, if you let him, since we create our own reality from our own thoughts, so choose better thoughts.
There it is. Yeah. It's for the most part, I don't want to generalize, even though generalizing can be fun. Right. But, the majority of our experience is dictated by our thoughts. Right. Our stories are the programs that we use to run our lives. So the best way to improve your life is to improve the programming, which is improving the stories that you have, right? And so I love the example that you gave, Joel, about Dave Ramsey, because there was a time where I followed Dave Ramsey as well. And there's a lot of different voices in, for example, the financial space, right? You got Dave Ramsey, you got Ramin Sadie. There's plenty of others who are really, really, really good at what they do. And they have a very specific lane that they kind of flow through, right? And so Dave Ramsey, anti-credit card debt. He's even anti-credit cards, period, right? Whereas there's other people who actually, they promote, like, there is actually such a thing as good debt. And you can use credit cards to create good debt and to increase your net worth. Both are correct, right? But it depends on the program that you particularly run. And sometimes that program can become outdated, right? And so kind of bringing it back to Stoicism, right? Temperance is one of the principles of Stoicism, where, things in moderation, right? And so naturally, as addicts, right, we want it all. We want to consume everything, right? So those binges of content or that particular voice, for some of us, is really good because it allows us to be a sponge and digest everything. But then, I want to call it a negative outcome, right? But something that could potentially happen is all of a sudden now you adopt that voice, you adopt that mindset, right? And you also adopt that behavior. And sometimes those things aren't productive for where you're trying to go moving ahead. So while getting out of debt was exactly what you needed, now to kind of stand tall above those who are in debt, right? You realize that didn't serve you and you needed a different voice that can help you move forward, and so awareness is super important in that process, and that's why I think recovery is awesome, because within the structure of recovery, you can have multiple sponsors over the course of your life because you need a different voice at different stages of your life. Doesn't mean that the previous sponsor is useless or they suck. It's just that, in that stage of life, they were exactly who you needed, and now they're no longer that person, and you need to find a different voice. And that's the beauty of the program. Most sponsors will totally be accepting of that and wish you well, And so it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I just talked to my sponsor, my first one, before I came to Mexico. I just said, "Hey, how you doing?" We hadn't talked in 4 years, and hey, he's like, "Good, glad you're doing well, super chill." And yeah, coming back to the money thing, that's so funny. Speaking of the recovery programs, there's a recovery program for debt, and that's the one I found the most benefit from, because the piece that's missing with the Dave Ramsey stuff was that once you got out of debt, it wasn't about helping other people get out of debt. It was going to get that nice house, and then finally you can live the life you've always wanted to live. But in the recovery groups, a big part of it is service. It's service. What is it? Service, recovery, meetings, sponsorship,
service, recovery,
community. There we go. That's how much I know about recovery. So important to be of service and give back to people that are also struggling. And I think, like what you said, there's good debt and bad debt, and the bad debt, quote unquote, in the recovery groups is debt that's unsecured. So they call it secured debt and unsecured debt. So secured debt is debt that's backed by assets, or basically, for example, if I were to buy a guitar and I were to put $1,000 down, it's a $2,000 guitar. I put $1,000 in cash and I use the other $1,000 on the card. Well, I still have then a $1,700 guitar now that I own. So if I were to need to sell it, I could pay back that debt. So I don't do that, by the way, because I think being an addict, that could get dangerous. I'm just going to buy a car and a TV and all that on secured debt. And then the unsecured debt is like leasing a car, for example, or buying a car where you can't, if you were to sell the car, you wouldn't be able to make that money back. So that was a huge distinction for me, and kind of took that guilt away from, oh my God, if I, borrow or something like that, it's the end of the world. No, you just have to have the asset to pay it back. So we can do a whole conversation on debt. I'm sure some of the guys in the Men of Now community would be down to join on that one too. Yeah. It's such an important topic, especially in men's development, is getting control of your finances, which is something you can control. You can't always control who hires you, but you can control how you manage your money, how you spend it, etc. So I want to dive in a little bit into relationships here, because Thomas, you are a dating expert, and we talked a little about before the stream about how you can't control another person in the relationship. All you can do is control yourself. So how is Stoicism for both of you, Lando and Thomas? How has that played a role in developing relationships romantically, even friendships too?
Yeah. You want to take this one, Linda?
No, go ahead. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So as you said, like, so for example, like I'm married. I've been married for almost 10 years, right? Been with the same person for 13 plus. And one of the things that I've learned over time, and it was taught to me by another coach, is like, you can't control your wife, right? And I used to ignore this phrase, right? You can't control your wife. I didn't believe it, right? Like because I was still like active in my addiction. So I just didn't believe that, of course I could control her, right? But you can't, right? What I've learned over time is that, it's a good thing that I can't control her, right? But what I can do is I can control myself, right? And that changes everything, right? So, how I view my experience of my wife completely changes based on how I perceive it, right? How I choose to perceive it. But going back to, Stoicism and relationships, what I've learned is when I take responsibility for my contribution and how I show up in the relationship remarkably tends to be better, right? But if I take a step back and I start to point the finger and build resentment for things that I'm not experiencing or I feel like I'm getting in return from my wife, the relationship tends to not be great, right? So even from like a very simple, superficial level, like that holds true. So what I have deemed to be kind of my mode is by always leading with courage. Because one thing that I've learned in dating when you're single, right? Courage is what's required to get out there and make the initial move. And as a result of that, you gain confidence, right? And then the cycle repeats itself. Yeah. And then eventually when you're in a relationship, and I don't know if, I'm sure many of the guys in the community know this, but if you're watching from the outside and don't realize this, it doesn't matter if you're just meeting a woman or you've been with this woman for over 50 years, you're not going to lose the feeling of rejection, that fear of rejection. Like it's just not going to happen, right? It's still going to be a part of you that's going to feel a certain way. So to to kind of keep it at a very low level, you must exercise courage throughout your relationship. The moment you stop doing that, the more the fear becomes greater than your courage, and then you're going to start to feel insecure about the relationship, even if there's nothing to be insecure about. And a lot of that can be stemmed from abandonment wounds, childhood history, previous relationships. And so, I've learned from experience, and this is also something we were talking about before we went live. I've been on the record for many years telling people, the same skills you use to get into a relationship are the same skills you use to stay in a relationship. And I do believe that is true, but it's also not the whole story. As you grow into a relationship, dynamics change, right? Life changes, people change. But the principles don't have to. And oftentimes when more emotions are involved, when you become more emotionally invested in that person, in that relationship, this is where things can start to fall apart, because then you're making decisions based on that level of emotion. And it's hard not to allow that to happen when you're that emotionally invested, particularly in a romantic relationship. But this is where the practice of spiritual sobriety and stoicism can really come into place to keep you grounded just enough to know what the next best thing is to do, and to ultimately be of service, and stay out of yourself. Because when you're out of yourself, then there's no space for fear to exist or irrational action to take place to protect yourself. And that's the beauty when you're able to be of service, and that can exist inside of a relationship, or you're in a simple first interaction with someone that you're attracted to.
Bro, that was absolute gold. Like that is going on the channel. That was just spot on, man. One, you're not going to lose the feeling of rejection, and I think I've heard, and that was my goal to get in a relationship, so I don't have to feel that abandonment or a girl ever pulling away. And it's like I found that to be quite the opposite. They pull away more because now they're shit testing you.
Well, think about it. You're gonna have difficult conversations throughout life, right? It's gonna be moving in together. It's gonna be proposing to be engaged. It's going to be getting that I do. It's going to be talking about finances, maybe purchasing a home together, whether or not to have kids, how many kids to have, how you're going to raise said kids, what's going to happen when the kids go to college, how all these things. There's always, as life unfolds, there's always going to be conversations that are going to be somewhat challenging, and you don't know what the other person is going to say. I remember my wife and I, we had this story that neither of us wanted the same thing because the perception was I was always a big city kid, never wanted to leave the city, and she wants land and animals, and she wants to homestead, right? And because it felt so so opposite from each other, we created this perception of disconnect, that we didn't want the same thing.
Wow.
When we sat down and talked about it, we wanted similar things. We just weren't sure what it was going to look like, except for what we were clear on. And, here we are, I'm living in a smaller city, not in the suburbs, right? And I get the best of both worlds, and she also gets the best of both worlds too. So sometimes you have to have those hard conversations, because truth is they may say no, know, and you may not want to be prepared for what you need to do when she says no, but you have to. That's part of the process of better living, is being able to handle both scenarios and not be afraid of either one, because you know what you need, what is possible, or what the path can look like based on either decision.
Yeah. That is something I learned this last week, is they always have the right to say no. You always have the right to be abandoned, which is like, what? As long as you don't do it with yourself and learn how to do that, that's what's most important. But everybody has a chance to say, hey, I don't want you in my life anymore. And that's really powerful. Just having conversations, adult human conversations. Sometimes we get so invested in the game and having to, do the game and stuff. It's like, sometimes, like when did that shift for you, when you're like, okay, like I don't have to keep, maybe I do have to keep playing, but in this situation, I can just have a logical one-on-one conversation, or even in that conversation where you still gaming and like trying to play the male-female dynamic, that kind of thing.
I mean, after a while, like the game becomes being an adult, right? And being willing to have that conversation, right? Like in today's world, where you tend to see very immature men being kind of promoted as influencers and people that people should look up to, it actually is really attractive when you as a man are capable of having very open-ended adult conversations that aren't fueled by emotion, right? Now, it doesn't mean that your counterpart, your partner, isn't fueled by emotion, right? She may be, maybe even more than you've ever seen in your life, but your ability to handle the conversation is actually even more attractive than anything else. And that's what they look for. They may think they come in a conversation thinking they want something, but because of your ability to be strong and to not be swayed by emotion, it creates a level of trust and security and safety to allow them to even rethink if they even are that committed to the thing that they want, because they know that if they were to go your direction, they will feel safe and secure nonetheless. Right. But the truth is, as long as you two have the same kind of goal, which is to be together, chances are you're going to be also open to what she wants and be willing to provide that as well. Right. So now we're no longer in negotiation. Right. Now we're in collaboration. And I talk to my clients when I work with them is, when you go into an interaction with an attractive woman, no matter what stage of the game you're in, whether you're just meeting her or you're in a relationship with her, don't approach it from a negotiation, because the moment you do that, that's a frame where you believe you could lose something, right? But if you go into a frame of collaboration, then there's an opportunity for both of you to come out better, because you guys are working together towards a greater outcome. And that changes a lot.
Okay. Beautiful. Lando, any thoughts on that, man? I mean, just beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's a lot of wisdom, and it's important to listen to people who, if you want to get married, listen to people like Thomas, or that can show you the way. Personally, for me, I know a lot of guys, once earlier in their sobriety, they get sober, they start getting a little bit of money, life's turning around, and then before they know it, they're in a relationship, and they end up replacing their sobriety with the relationship, and then it's game over. So just be careful with relationships, especially early in your sobriety. And then they talk about a sex ideal. So basically, it's just somebody who shares the same values as you. So write down what you're looking in a female and see, and that gives you a target to shoot for if you're looking for a relationship. But never lose sight of your sobriety. That's all I have to say.
Oh, bringing it back to home, Lando. I appreciate that. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. The amount of people that, you see come into the rooms, and then they're there for like 6 months, and then the next share is like, I met someone, and everyone's like, oh no, here we go.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, congrats. But deep down, you're like, oh.
To make that new relationship your higher power, right?
Yes.
And that's when things can fall apart, So like when you said, Lando, like sobriety is everything, like that's really, really true, right? Like for me, it's my connection with God, who I call my higher power, my sobriety, everything else after, right? Like, because if I don't have those two, I'm fucked. Right? Like so, and I have data to prove that, right? I have lots of data to prove that, so I can't even question it. So that is above all else, and it even comes into my conversations with my wife, in day-to-day conversations with my work, my mental health, the responsibilities that I take on, the work that I do with my clients. Like, I have to think about, is this going to compromise my sobriety? Am I going to put myself in a compromising position where I have to guard my sobriety? And there's a difference between blind courage, which has no spiritual bounds, and wisdom, right? You kind of mentioned the wisdom, right? That's why in the serenity prayer, that key part is the wisdom to know the difference, right? So understanding, all right, is this an environment where I could lose control, or is this an environment where I can be able to regulate and go in with the trust of and the grace of God to guide me through, right? And having that wisdom to know the difference. That's prayer, can be applicable to any scenario you enter, especially in relationships. Because that with that wisdom comes back to what I was saying before, the pause. That inside that pause, I think, is where wisdom can show up for each of us in our own way.
They say you pause when agitated, fearful, or doubtful, or in some regard to that. And it's like, yep, that if that comes up, take a moment. It's easy as people who want to work too, like that workaholic. I've spent many hours in work addiction groups, so that's out there too, guys. Just that needing to get stuff done, and so it's gonna kind of tough to. It's tough, but it's simple once you imply the right tools, and I think recovery is a great way to do that. So taking that pause, trusting on that wisdom, and your wisdom will grow. So if you're not there yet, don't beat yourself up. I'm kind of talking to myself here. I learned a bunch of stuff about dating this week that I never would have thought I'd ever have to learn, and now there's wisdom, and it's like you can be great at one thing and terrible at another. So just always having that humble mindset that, there's always more to learn, and you're always going to be learning and growing as you continue on this journey. I think it can be really helpful. And when big learning moments come, that they don't just like derail you and make you like question everything, go back to the bottle, pick up the joint again, have you turn towards those addictive things. So last thing I do want to touch on was, before we wrap here, was the last thing Thomas said in that really great, I would say, how do you say, spiel of words you said in sequential order. And then it's what you did to keep the girl. What you did to get the girl is what you do to keep the girl. So I think that's very important. A lot of folks, they're listening to one right now. they get comfortable and then they stop doing the actual, like, the attraction things. It's like, okay, I'm comfortable, we can just be friends now and everything's gonna be good. And then what I'm finding, and thankfully the girl I'm seeing doesn't speak very good English, so if she sees this, hopefully she doesn't understand, and I won't turn captions on. So that I stopped playing the game, and I stopped doing the flirtation. I went too deep. I started talking about really personal things. I stopped keeping it fun and light. It got really heavy at times. And they started to pull back, and it freaked me out. I'm just like, all my abandonment wounds came up, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like, here we go. I'm so grateful now because it's always been there. And this situation, she was just the catalyst for this growth to happen. So I'm very grateful for her actually for pulling back. And I see, I try to force things, I try to push things. So what I'm doing in this situation is going back to the roots, going back to the flirtation, the keeping it light, like not being super available. And we're going to see what happens, and it's, and again, coming back full circle, if she leaves, I'm going to be okay. If she stays, I'm going to be okay. It's also a little, one element too, is that they are not sober. So finding somebody in sobriety, I think, is a big challenge. And you can't go to support groups to meet women. Don't do that. They call it 13th stepping. Yep. So just don't do that. So it is like, is this person actually compatible with me? And that's a big question I got some soul searching on too. As long as they're not an addict, to say, or an alcoholic, maybe it can work. And then there's also that element of me that hopes that they will change, which is codependency, which isn't healthy. So there's a lot at play here. And I got to do some real soul searching, but being able to talk about this with you guys and on this channel is how you grow. And with mentors, as Lando said, getting some good sponsors. What's great about the recovery programs is you can get a sponsor for no cost. They're just there to support you. You don't got to pay $500 an hour. And you might have a lifelong relationship. My current sponsor, we've been seeing each other for like 3.5 years. Great guy. Never seen him in person, but he's helped me through some tough times. So with that, guys, I think we're gonna call it a wrap. And just want to thank everyone for coming on today, and especially for the panel. Lando and Thomas, thank you guys so much. It was great to kind of get a little more into your story, Lando. I know we just have met once besides this. So before we wrap, let's go around the horn, tell everyone where they can find you and what you're doing in the world at this moment. And Lando, we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure speaking with you, Thomas and Joel, sharing our experience, strength, and hope. And I think it was a powerful discussion. So thank you so much. And if you're sick and suffering out there, you don't have to do it anymore. There's a different way of life. So just reach out. And there's gentlemen like us here in this panel that are willing to help. And if you want to know a little bit about me, you can reach me on YouTube at Crypto Lando, and come join us at the Men on Now community. We're all working together to better our lives and enhance and just live a better life on this journey. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Lando.
Thanks, Lando. Yeah, it's great to meet you, man. It's always great to just meet a fellow man in recovery, man, and hearing your story and sharing that experience, strength, and hope is so important. And I double click what Lando said. If you are struggling and you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't like the person that's in the reflection, there is a solution, right? It may not be my solution, it may not be Lando's solution, but there is a solution out there for you. And if you're willing to ask for help, which I know is easier said than done because I've been there. It was very hard for me to, be virtually on my knees begging for help, but it changed my life. And if that's something that you're looking for, or if you see anybody here or inside of your community, and you see their lives and you're like, I want that life, go up and talk to them because they'll be glad to help you. There's people like us all around the world who want to help you. That's part of being of service. We want to give the gift that was given to us and give it to other people. So please feel free to reach out to, I'll speak for myself, reach out to myself if you do. And you can find me at theprofessionalwingman.com. That's my website, or you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Thomas H. Edwards Jr. And I'm also in the Men and Now community too. These guys, as the community grows, it's just a good group of men, with the sole purpose of wanting to improve each other's lives, and so for a very little investment, which I believe is always necessary if you're really going to commit to leveling up your life, you can have access to some amazing people who you can actually have some really powerful connections and relationships with. And so hit that up, menofnow.us, and hope to see you guys in there.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. And to reiterate what the boy said, yep, there's always support out there. We're all here to help you and support you. And you'll be, from trauma, it may seem that people aren't there for you. And I know I had to go through that myself. And once I found myself surrounded by healthy people, I realized that, yes, people do want to help, and the healthy people want to help. Other people, not. They're going to do their own thing. But so absolutely hit me up as well on Instagram. We can have a chat, discuss what you're going through. If you do want some personalized help, I definitely recommend to book a call with me for sober living coaching. We'll help you start living that sober dream life. And with the people I coach, I find that it's a very simple, come down to some mindset shifts that get them into the idea that there's more to live for than the drugs or the alcohol or the substance. And like, I had a call with a buddy last week, and all we talked about was dating, because he doesn't even think about the addiction anymore because he has so many goals to focus on. So it was really exciting to see, and it was way more fun than talking about weed. So that was a bonus too. If you do want that, I know, making that investment might not be available for all people at this moment. So I invite you to download the recovery resource guide that some friends and I created. It's got over 30 free, or I'd say 30 non-paying meetings, support groups, forums, YouTube channels, videos, books, all things that can help you on your journey. I think the books and movies you probably got to pay for, but everything else is absolutely free. And you can get all the support that us three have gotten in recovery through these support groups, which are all free. There's hundreds of meetings throughout the week, almost 24/7, for any addiction you can possibly think of. Not even kidding. Caffeine, internet technology, right? There's so many different support groups, and for family too. Like, if you are watching this and one of your family members or close loved ones is in addiction, and you're struggling to know how to support them and set those boundaries, and maybe you're just tired of watching them just kind of destroy their lives and feeling affected by it, there's groups for that too, that can really help you kind of learn how to set those boundaries and detach from them emotionally, so you can be your own. You can start living your own life again and let them make their own decisions. So that's down there. If you want to check that out as well, just enter your email and it'll be sent right to your inbox. Other than that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Shout out to all the boys who commented, and as well as Janet for the last minute stuff. It's good to see you again. And Kevin and Renegade. Once again, if you want to hit up their channels, check it out below. Professional Wingman for some awesome dating advice, and Crypto Lando as well for obvious crypto advice. And with that, guys, we'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.